discussion, deliberations, and hopefully get to a vote. Mr. Alvarez or Ms. Waller, do you want to go through these sheets that you just passed out?
Thank you, Chairwoman. What we've passed out to you and we'll have up on the slides and we'll have in the back are based upon your board's guidance, recommendations that the CEO's office has for funding those program restorations. What we've also provided you, and will be in the back of the room, are responses to the strategic reserve question that Supervisor Lavanino had. So I think that if your board's ready, we're ready to start sharing some thoughts with you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So what we have here is a matrix which by now you're probably painfully familiar with. On the green side, what we have are the programs that your board asked us to find funding sources for. As you will recall, you gave us guidance on which of those were ongoing and which of those are one-time. On the left side in the blue are suggestions that the CEO's staff has for how you can fund those. So I'll just start at the top, and please do fill it. Then if you need more information or wish to discuss it, just stop me at any point, obviously. Human Services Commission, you indicated you wanted that to be with ongoing funds. So I'm suggesting that you use the RDA ongoing revenue that is anticipated to flow to the county next fiscal year in the amount of $1.2 million. Conventioner and Visitors Bureau, $195 of one time. So we're recommending that you use the 1112 RDA fund balance. And just to remind the board, we have about $2.3 million that came to us in 1112. ProPay, you asked for that to be ongoing, so we're recommending ongoing RDA revenue. And when I say RDA revenue, as I know your board's aware, that would all come into just your typical general fund. But for simplicity of you understanding where those additional revenues are coming from, I'm using that terminology. Truancy program, you indicated you would like to see that funded ongoing. My recommendation for the upcoming year is to use the department's fund balance, and then in future years we would come back to you with, as a part of our budget, that would be an ongoing, and we would actually just use general fund revenues for future years. On the mechanic, $70,000 one time. We would be looking to the program restoration. You may recall in your designations that you had $183,000 that was remaining in that account. Water and sewage plant operator, $94,000. We're recommending the program restoration account. Veteran services, you asked that that be ongoing. We're recommending ongoing RDA revenue. Emergency shelter services, $45,000. We're recommending 1112 RDA fund balance. Guadalupe Dunes staffing, $23,000. We're recommending program restoration funding. Ag biologist, $88,000 one time. We're recommending anticipated 1213 ag department savings. Contractual acute inpatient psychiatric beds, $216,000. We're recommending your 1112 RDA fund balance. Fire engine 11, $1.8 million. We're recommending union concessions. Match for the Beacon EIR for plastic bag ban, $8,000. We're recommending your 1112 RDA fund balance. Fire Station 22, $468,000. We're recommending department savings, RDA unanticipated, that will be fund balance this year as the two sources for that. Clerk of the board, $50,000. We're recommending 1112 RDA fund balance. Two plumbers, $145,000. We're recommending RDA 1112 fund balance. Custody deputies, $161,000. We're recommending Sheriff Department fund balance. Isla Vista Embarcadero, $1 million. We're recommending 1112 RDA fund balance. And just as you were probably adding these up in your head as we moved along, I thought that it would be helpful that we have pre-totaled those for you. And you may recall your RDA one-time fund balance from 11/12 is anticipated to be $2.3 million, and what these total up to are approximately $2.2 million. On the ongoing side, where I recommended the RDA ongoing, the total there that I have included is about $1.6 million, and we are anticipating that you'll have someplace between $2 and $4 million that will be coming in on an ongoing basis from the RDA dissolution. And as I mentioned before, one of the reasons that I'm being very frugal in recommending use of that dollar is that we have a lot of litigation out there, we have a lot of legislation out there, so as I mentioned before, I really encourage your board to be somewhat frugal in that until we see how that all sorts out. Something that you will also undoubtedly note is that for the most part I didn't go to the designations for restoration, and I'd certainly be happy to explain specifically why I didn't, but as I looked at those, I felt that each and every one of those, except for the program restoration, really is important to keep for your future year use, both in 12-13 and in 13-14, and frankly in years beyond. So that's why I didn't go back to that chart and recommend that you take further dollars to backfill or restore programs.
All right, thank you, Ms. Waller. Comments from the board. Supervisor Wolf.
Ms. Waller, thank you for doing this. You mentioned the strategic reserve information is in the back of the room. Can you just touch on that real quick?
Certainly, I would ask that Mr. Alvarez do that for us. He has the detail, and Andrew, if you'd bring up that slide for us as well, please. Tom, I'm going to ask you to just quickly come on down here so that we can get going on this one. And the slide we're looking for, Andrew, is the one that had the designation with the strategic reserve on it.
Okay, and I see they're just pulling it up now. This is the handout I just gave to you. Okay, let's see. This is an old one. Andrew, if you'll go to slide 34, please. There we go. Okay, so this was just updated over the break. And so what we've done here is, if you recall, is we started with the 38 million. This was the total from the last schedule that we had reviewed previously during this presentation. I believe that was on Monday. The projected changes that we have in here now, that middle column, the 183,494, we've used all of the program restoration there, and that, as we said, will be funding the mechanic, the water and sewage position, and Guadalupe Dunes. And it actually comes out to about 187, so we will be using $3,000 or $4,000 out of contingency to balance that out, but primarily we're using this account. The next one is out of contingency, so this is the $250,000 was a final budget adjustment coming through this morning. That would be money used for the ADMHS consultants. And then the last is the strategic reserve. As you recall, we started with 21.8 million. And so what we've done now is, with the updated and most recent numbers, we have that the 11-12 RDA distribution was $2.3 million. The revised general revenue favorable variance was $1.2 million. And then what we're doing now is we've just, as CEO Waller went through the list of the 11-12 funds that we would be using, the 11-12 RDA distribution funds, that totals $1,850,000, so that's coming out of there. And then we also identified some 12-13 funds, and that wouldn't be in here yet. That would be rolling in next year. So this is the updated look at the strategic reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Supervisor Wolf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the contingencies, you mentioned the consultant, but it's not noted there. This is what I brought up earlier about the tax, or was it the assessor position? Is that figured in there?
Yes. Chair Farr, Supervisor Wolf, those were already taken into account when we rolled forward that first column of information as we had shown that previously.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess we're real close now. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. I agree with 99% of this. My only concern now is to find out whether we do have a third vote for at the sheriff and DA, if that would come out of their existing budget, or if it's something that we would move from one of these contingency funds. So I've heard a second vote, but I didn't know if there was a third. If there is, then I guess I would ask the CEO to try to figure out where out of these contingency funds we would take it.
Okay. I see both the DA and the sheriff. DA Dudley, would you like to come to the podium, please? So the board made an assumption here based on fund balance that we could go ahead and fund the truancy program from what you showed. So do you want to speak to that issue?
Sure. Well, this was the first that we, the District Attorney's Office, heard of using criminal prosecution funds to support the county truancy program. So we were, of course, taken aback. And that flies in the face of what our mandate is as a District Attorney's Office. Further, there being no discussion with our office about this, we weren't given an opportunity to tell you that those funds are already spoken for. Much of those funds are restricted funds, so I can go through that. There's Southwest Border Funds, $323,000 of Southwest Border Funds. We have to spend that in a restricted way only in situations where there is a federal jurisdiction over a case as well as a county jurisdiction, and then we take over that case. There's also civil penalties of $107,000. Those have to be spent in civil prosecutions. So when you say that there's this extra money out there that's available for the truancy program, it's just not accurate. Also, in terms of what we've been doing and why we've been doing it, it appears that because we have been very aggressive in terms of saving funds, because we were told early on, you're going to need those funds in 13-14. So what's happened at the District Attorney's Office? We have people who are working on our office at their expense. They're coming to work day in and day out, volunteers at their expense, and we did that to save money for 13-14. We have employees that we've kept who have not been getting benefits. They've been, because we've been saving that money for 12-13, 13-14. Most of our attorneys, many of our support staff got salary cuts this year. Why? So the District Attorney's Office could stay afloat in 13-14. I'm responsible for public safety, and the way to do that is to rigorously prosecute cases. When we work hard in our office to put aside money just so we can maintain safety both for 11-12, 12-13, and 13-14, to suddenly be in a situation where we're now told, and also that truancy program you've been volunteering all this time for, it should come out of your line item.
So the short answer is if we can find $170,000 someplace else, you would like us to do that.
An excellent short answer.
Thank you. Supervisor Lavanino?
And Madam Chair, and I know I served on the committee with Supervisor Carbajal, but you know, we made a lot of assumptions while we were going through that program, and we knew that eventually there'd come a time where this was a new program. I mean, the program was originally back in 07, 08, and it was killed, and we saw truancy go up 50%. So we knew that there was going to be an investment that we would have to make into their department to make her whole. And so for me, it's difficult then to come back as a board member and say, well, you saved money, and so now all those meetings that we went through with the truancy program are going to fall on your shoulders. So I have serious heartache with that, so I'm hoping that we can find another way to do it.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Carbajal, did you want to?
Thank you. I was just going to echo what Supervisor Lavanino said. It's sort of punishing the district attorney for implementing a program that, although is not at the core of and the thrust of their core mission, we know at the end it's going to pay off in the long run. But I don't think that was ever my intent, and I would hope it's not the intent of the board. So I'm like Supervisor Lavanino, and I'm hoping to hear from my colleagues to see if we have others who feel the same. So that would give us good guidance on how to proceed. We could just hear from our colleagues.
Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, DA Dudley. And, you know, seeing the final numbers here, I would be open and willing to looking at a general fund source or an RDA source. You know, one of the first things that I said on Monday was maintaining our programs. And this truancy program was a program that we had, and it was a program that I supported, and unfortunately it went away because of budget issues. So, and I think what we've seen is kind of the downfall and what the result of eliminating that program. So, yes, I would be in favor of looking at a different revenue source. But in the same vein, I'm going to make another pitch to my colleagues, and that is that the money that we are not allocating for the ADMHS IMD beds is another important source for our community. And by not allocating that money and giving them that opportunity to have those beds available should they need them, really, those really are the most vulnerable people. And the stories that we heard have been so moving, and it's not just fictional tales. And I think the cost of $120,000 to have those two beds available is worth it. So I would just ask my colleagues to, you know, as we're looking at this and we see that our strategic reserve is increased, that's a great thing. We all like to see that. But at what expense? And what I say is that $120,000 for those folks who need a bed, I think it's worth it. So anyway, to get back to the original question, I am okay finessing the funding so that it doesn't come out of the DA's balance, and that we look at another source for that program.
Thank you.
And I also hope I can get some support for those other beds.
I'm more than okay with the DA's, the truancy dollar coming from somewhere other than the DA's fund balance. I didn't know what the fund balance was caused, and once Ms. Dudley made that statement, it doesn't make sense to take it from their fund balance. What was accomplished with the truancy situation was that instead of the county and the DA paying for the entire program, the schools are now helping out. And when we cut it, 4 years ago, it was all entirely at the county's expense, and yet it was the schools that were generating the revenue. So I think that it's money well spent for the county to take the 170, and hopefully next year, as we look at this again, we may get more from the schools, because they're the ones that are benefiting through ADA. So I'm fine with that.
Thank you, and I'm fine with that as well. CEO Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, I understand the board's desire, and we will find those, but I feel compelled to correct some of the inaccuracies that were just shared with you. In fact, when we took a look at the monies that needed to be reserved for special purposes, we didn't consider those in what we were bringing forward to you. As your board may recall, you gave $1.3 million of your strategic reserve last year to the DA for continuation of certain programs that were scheduled for elimination. After the budget closed, there were substantial dollars that the DA actually had in fund balance. Additionally, and these are all good things, the DA went after many grants last year and was successful. So dollars that possibly would have been utilized, general fund dollars, were able to have some grants. Prop 172. Prop 172 dollars actually have come in this year substantially higher than what was budgeted, and those departments that have Prop 172 designations have benefited by that. Another source of those savings are the DA's office had several very experienced and highly paid individuals that retired over the last year, and the DA was able to recruit new lawyers at a much lower cost. And again, all those are good things, but they are certainly not prohibited by any designations from your board's discretion to do what you'd like to at those fund balances. And just one last reminder, because I have it in here, and if you would choose to change the DAs, possibly you would want to look at some of the others. On the ag biologist, what you were discussing, what I actually proposed, are savings that the ag department hasn't even achieved yet, that because they were very proactive in seeking additional funding and are likely able to free up, I recommended use of those funds. And so if the concept is you keep what you save, and that indeed is a very good one, you may want to reconsider that one as well.
All right. Sheriff, I think you want to say something now.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned me when you mentioned the DA. I just wanted to come up and just sort of clarify that many of the same points that DA Dudley brought to your attention really apply with us as well. I think it's important to recognize that the Prop 172 designation in our department is there because we did have, as CEO Waller said, some higher than anticipated 172 funding coming in. We don't know that that's going to be the case ongoing. And as such, really, the 172 designation should be utilized for unanticipated non-personnel related costs like equipment or capital expenses and so forth. And we've done that and do see that as, in essence, a small contingency fund for us to utilize. Bear in mind that that fund balance is currently less than 0.5% of our budget, but nevertheless, it is something that's there and available for us to use in the event that we have some unforeseen need that has to be taken care of immediately. So my request of you would be to similarly to look for some other area of the budget for this funding rather than to take it from our designations.
Supervisor Wolf?
Thank you, Sheriff. CEO Waller, can you, I can't find the piece of paper where we had the 172 increases. Or Mr. Geis, do you have that?
I have that. I do not have that with me. If Mr. Geis does, please feel free to salvage me here.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Wolf, I don't have that handy. I could do a little research and get it, but if you could just hold for a minute.
Okay. I just want to say that I think CEO Waller, I think your comments rang true in a lot of ways. Although I do look at the truancy program a little bit differently than the ag. But when it comes to an increase in the 172, I'd like to just see what that funding is. Because it may be that that funding does go to the district attorney and to the sheriff, and I'm not really clear why the sheriff feels that 172 money shouldn't go to his custody deputies. I'm sure that in the past you've used 172 or commingled it for some employee costs. So I don't think that we necessarily have to delineate that it just go to capital.
So, Madam Chair, so while we're waiting.
Yeah, hang on just a sec. Are you done for a moment?
I'm done until we hear from
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Geis.
Go ahead and
So
Supervisor.
while we're
Waller.
waiting, I was just curious if CEO Waller had any recommendations, since it looks like we do have at least a majority in support of the truancy, where we might find those dollars from.
Chairwoman, Supervisor, I would recommend that you look at your 1112 RDA one-time funding as a alternate source for that.
But I thought we were down to only $100,000 left in there. Because that was my first choice, too.
I think I may have actually misspoke earlier. You actually, or I actually had only proposed about 1.7 million. There's another $200,000 that is anticipated to come before your board on the 26th for the El Embarcadero agreement that we have with the developer. And so you would have adequate capacity still within that 2.3 for the DA if you chose to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Geis, do you have, looks like you may have the answer? No, okay.
The question is, do you want it by department or for all Prop 172 money?
Why don't you give it for all of the departments? And this is additional 172.
Where do you think we're working on that? Hold on. And we're not talking about for...
Or you know what, just give us the district attorney and the sheriff.
And you're looking for the additional money that they've received for this year?
Correct.
Over and above their
Over and
budget?
above.
It's about one. Okay, got it. So the change... Madam Chair, members of the board, the change that from the adjusted fiscal year budget for the sheriff to the projected fiscal year end actual, they have an additional $1 million.
That's, okay.
And for the district attorney, from the adjusted fiscal year budget to the projected year-end fiscal budget, it only says $38,000, which means they have a large estimate that's giving me a misreading. So I wouldn't count on either of those. I think we should do some more work before we give you that. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I mean, I think as far as the funding for the sheriff, I'm happy with how it's written in CEO Waller's printout. And I think as far as the DA goes, you can look at the RDA piece.
Comments? I'm sorry, Supervisor Wolf, did you have any other comments? Supervisor Gray, did you want to say something? Other comments from the board? Supervisor
Well, I've
Carvajal?
already stated where I stand, so it's just a matter of understanding where the votes are and how they're going to go one way or the other, so.
Okay, well, Supervisor Carvajal, let me just get some clarity on that. Are you just talking about for the DA's office?
I was talking about both, but we already dealt with the DA, just
Okay.
now we're dealing with the sheriff.
Okay, so let me just make sure, we have consensus on the board right now that the $170,000 for the truancy program in the district attorney's office would now instead come from ongoing, from the RDA, 1112 RDA balance. I'm getting nods. Okay, so we've done that. All right. Now, we want to talk about the custody deputies. Supervisor
I thought I
Levin,
was the one that made the suggestion that we do find another source, so I'm just looking for some
Okay.
support.
So find another source for the custody deputies. All right, Supervisor Gray, where are you on that?
I want to stay with the CEO's recommendation.
Same with me.
Oh, fun. All right, well, let me just change the conversation for a moment. I'm still looking for a third vote on the homeless manager. And she's looking for 2 votes on the IMD inpatient beds.
Okay, let's change the conversation, because I like where you're going. Go ahead.
You know, I think because both of these were kind of handled the same way, that they should be solved the same way. So I'll go ahead and support finding another source for the custody deputies. But I would like to see whether anybody else on the board still would consider Supervisor Wolf's request and mine on these other 2 items that didn't have enough votes the last time. Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you, Supervisor Farr, for keeping this conversation going on the what is it? I want to say the IMD.
Inpatient beds.
beds. And when we talked about the homeless merger, and I think I expressed that it would be better to wait 2 weeks so that we could have a job description and a better understanding of what that position is. But I'm confident in my support of that position. It's just that I wanted more information. So I would be willing to put my vote for that position, but only with the knowledge that I can get 2 more people to vote for the IMD inpatient beds at $121,000. That the fact is that we may not need them, but if we do, the department has those funds available. So I need 2 votes on those IMD beds.
I think what we're trying to do is come up with a continuum of care.
Exactly. Thank you.
I just want to look at county council as far as, I haven't really done this too many times, but, I mean, can we do this?
Yes.
Madam Chair, you can do that, but it's not highly advised when you're crafting public policy to swap votes.
Well,
Can I tell, you know what, that's a little offensive, Supervisor Carbajal. I'm not swapping votes. What I'm trying to do is get funding for an item that I think is utmost important in our community. That's what I'm trying to do. I can wait for 2 weeks, but I think if we want to get this taken care of now, we can and we should. And I've already said that I'm most likely going to be voting for that homeless position, so it's not swapping votes. What I'm trying to do is and I think Supervisor Farr said it right, this is the continuum of care. This is what this whole thing is about. We're providing money to the homeless. We're providing money for truancy, we're trying to keep people safe. And for $120,000, and especially when we look now at our budget projections, that it's beyond me that I cannot find 2 people who can agree that $120,000, thank you, Supervisor Carbajal, is well spent. That's all I'm asking, is $120,000.
Okay. So we've dealt with the DA truancy issue. I've supported the $161,000 for the custody deputies not to come out of the fund balance. CEO Waller, where else might we take that?
Well, we're getting pretty slim right now, but you do have still a small amount of money that would be left over from the RDA one time, and I would recommend that we use that for your 161.
The RDA one time, so you can cover both of those items through what you think is left there?
Yes, according to our hasty calculations, both of those will just fit within that.
Okay. All right, so that's taken care of. Supervisor Levin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, not to wrap it up, but so the way we have it, we would still fund those, so we would still carry over all of our salary and benefit. Our strategic reserve is going up, and we funded all of these items. And all of these other sources are still intact, correct?
Chair, Supervisor, the strategic reserve would be reduced just that slight bit amount by the 2 additions that we just had for the sheriff and DA, but otherwise, yes, what you said is accurate.
Okay, so we'd be around $23,230,000 or something like that. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, and as procedure goes, if we're getting close to making final motions, tell us again where those are and how they would have to be modified, if at all.
Mr. Alvarez or Mr. Allen? We're going to pull those up so that not only you, but our audience can see as well.
Mike, are you going to go on this or you?
Mr. Allen will do that for us.
Madam Chair, members of the board, you have two distinct set of recommendations that would need to be voted upon to effectuate the budget. Item 1 would be to consider all those recommendations regarding the fiscal year 2012-13 recommended operation plan and budget, to approve the final budget adjustments to fiscal year 12-13 recommended budget, delegate authority to the county executive officer to execute ongoing grants and contracts included in the recommended budget, authorize the county executive officer to approve ongoing contracts where amounts are up to 10% more or less than indicated amounts, or up to $5,000 more or less than indicated amounts on contracts under $50,000 without returning to the board for approval, and to adopt a resolution entitled "In the Matter of Adopting the Budget for Fiscal Year 2012-2013." In addition, a second item, this relates to the joint hearing. This is to consider recommendations regarding fiscal year 2012-13 recommended budget for the County of Santa Barbara as successor agency to the former County of Santa Barbara Redevelopment Agency, and acting as the successor agency to the former Santa Barbara County Redevelopment Agency, to adopt a resolution entitled "In the Matter of Adopting the Budget for Fiscal Year 12-13 for the County of Santa Barbara as successor agency to the former County of Santa Barbara Redevelopment Agency."
All right, so they are in effect these two sheets that we had as part of our binder, except on the first one, approving the final budget adjustments. It would be also as amended today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the second one has to do with the successor agency. All right. Anybody have any additional comments, changes, questions? Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you. Just my only final comment is on the fire department, because we're holding this up for their union concessions. And speaking of public policy, I don't like to negotiate from the dais. And so I think that whatever happens, I think we've all stated that we're concerned about losing Fire Station 11 and the one in Orcutt. So I just want to make sure that this is an important issue that would need to come back to the board before any elimination, if that was to occur.
CEO Waller, is that correct?
Chair, Supervisor, with the savings that the department has, I've spoken with the chief, and he believes that he has the ability to continue his operations during the time that we are in somewhat of a hiatus of the pay raise with the fire members. And so we would come back to your board in August with the results of the negotiations, in addition to possible budget adjustments as a result of those.
Thank you. Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I want to thank CEO and other board members. I think this was pretty smooth, actually. Even it got bumpy at the end, but I just want to highlight something that I mean, when I looked at parks, I had thought about, don't get upset now, beach parking fees in the future. I used to think of something that would be nice to have, and now it's almost like it's going to have to be a necessity. I mean, if we're going to maintain our parks, we saw where we are on one-time fixes. We're not going to be able to save these jobs next year. There's no way. So I think we really got to get on the ball, because I think we started this 6 months ago, and we're already a month behind what our timeline is. So I want to make sure we stay on the ball on that. As far as revenue creation, I'd even be interested. I know it'd probably be surprising to start with me, but I'd be interested in us taking a look at an increase of TOT and what that would mean to us. We're going to need every piece of revenue that we can get. And also, even though it's not in my district, I look at Kachuma as a resource that I'm not sure we're really maximizing on, and I would really like us to take a strong look at how we can. I know we've talked about a water park, we've talked about some other things, a swimming beach, that sort of thing. All these things, I think we really, even though we're cutting back staff, we've got to we've got to really move forward quickly on these things, because next year, we're going to be even worse shape, and I just think these are items that we've bandied about as ideas for revenue, but we've really got to get to it and make it happen. If we have thumbs up or thumbs down, and let's go with it and make it happen.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board at this time? All right, well then I'll entertain a motion. We actually have two sets of recommended actions.
Separate motions. And Madam Chair, members of the board, it would be appropriate to make two separate motions.
Okay, so the first one is the one with the 4 bullet points as amended today.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I just want to make sure we get one clarification as we finalize our motions. Truancy is ongoing. We made that clear, and I just want to make sure that's correct.
Yes, it was my understanding that it would be, even though I was recommending a one-time source this year, it would be built into the budget for
Great,
next
thank you.
year.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, so motion? Somebody make a motion? Okay, are you moving this?
Yes, Madam Chair, I am moving that. I'm moving the recommendations.
I will second those.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries, and that's as amended today. And then the second motion is acting as a successor agency.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate all of staff and department head and the public's participation in this very difficult process.